Hey everybody, I'm Jody Vance.
And I'm George-Affleck.
And it's time for
Let's talk. Let's talk. Shall we? UnSpun. Yeah.
What a dark day, George.
In media. Yeah. W5 gone. Can't believe it.
All of the noon and 6 p.m. weekend newscasts across CTV gone. All of the weekend noon and 6, and then the weekday noon gone. It's like
Yeah.
getting texts from people across the country. I had a friend of mine, Dan, who sent me a note just saying, just watching my friends getting walked out of CP24 in Bloomberg. And then I've got, other friends locally here at CTV that are just like, I can't believe what's happening here. I can't believe it. And it's like a remarkable number of people, and not just people, but also radio stations being sold off, quote unquote, sold off, and in the next sentence, deemed unviable as a business model. So that's not like the radio station is going to be sold. I'm speculating here, but the radio station is going to be put up for sale. And then that means the property, the brick and mortar is for sale. And oftentimes, like what we saw here with TSN 1040 and 1410, both of those licenses were just AM licenses were just handed back. Like
Which
you
is,
go on.
if you've lived long enough, you think, man, those people used to fight for those licenses and pay so much money and go through such a process to get a license to broadcast in Canada, which is coveted. It was coveted. I referenced in my opener there, Let's Talk, which is Bell's little program they do for mental health care. And that was on January 24th, 2 weeks ago, which I was surprised at. We were talking before the show that we kind of missed it. Like usually it's a
If
kind
you'd
of a
asked
big
me what
deal.
date it was for Bell Let's Talk, I would not be able to tell you. There's usually this preamble of get ready, here it comes, here it
Yeah.
comes. And then on the day, even people who work in competition, everybody be like, you know what?
Yeah.
For the sake of this initiative, we're gonna come together on it. And it feels really hollow right now. I mean, it is an
Yeah.
industry. And this is a business, right? Like so many other
Yeah.
things. When we're talking about how Netflix destroyed the video rental shop, or how the gig economy, ride sharing is impacting the taxi,
Mm-hmm.
industry. Like
Mm-hmm.
there are those things. But I really feel strongly, as a member of the media for almost 3 decades now, and starting off at a little AM radio station and knowing firsthand, not as somebody, I don't work full time in radio. I love radio and I listen to radio. When there's something going on, when there's a snow day, when there's a flood, when there's some kind of massive infrastructure issue, or I don't know, global pandemic, you want to know what's happening in your neighborhood. And if it's all originating out of Toronto, God bless the center of the universe, it doesn't tell
To
us
all our
what's
fans
happening
in
here,
Ontario,
right?
to
Like
all our
it's,
fans,
I worry
it's
about that.
yeah, and the irony of the mental health care. This is obviously a mental health care day for this next week for a lot of people
Thousands.
who got laid off across Canada. Of course, bottom line is bottom line. A lot of people are attacking the corporate, entities, and how dare they. But if there's no money, there's no money, and that's the challenge. You've seen it in the newspaper industry. Just a couple of weeks ago, we heard about Black Press being in BC here, being in a lot of risk at declaring protection. We've seen cuts at Chorus. We've seen, you and I've lived long enough, and I worked in
I've been laid
CBC
off.
when there was major cuts when I was at CBC.
I was
We've been,
cut
you were
same
cut,
day
yeah.
as George
I was cut at
Strombolopoulos and
CBC.
Jennifer Valentine. They just
Yeah.
top line you that here's all the highest paid people.
Oh, I
Here,
was the
off
lowest
you
paid
go.
person, which was ironic. But I got cut, but the next day hired on contract.
Right,
It's
but
like,
that's
okay,
because last one in,
weird.
first one out in a union environment, right? So
Yes,
that's
that's
the
right.
difference. I wasn't
Yes,
part of a union when I
right.
was laid off, and I was quite pleased to not be getting up that early in the morning. But
Good thing we do this at 11:30 every Thursday.
they say no one gets into this industry for job security, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's part of this as well. It's remarkably worse now than it has ever been, not just because of these layoffs, but because with every layoff, somebody who remains has an expanded workload to cover the person that's gone, because the need for the content still exists. The want for you
Yeah.
to shoot, edit, write, file for the noon, file for the 5, file for the 6. Now show up at 11 with a stand up out, and because we will always need the content. You mentioned the money piece of it, and here's where I think there is an argument about the business model, is that these small stations used to be at one time independent, and they
Mhm.
were bought up, kind of like grocery stores, bought up and bought up and bought up in this big
Yeah.
company that reports to shareholders. And people are complaining about the Bell CEO's whatever $36 million paycheck, which is always going to be, how much are the executives making? But
Yeah.
because you're a business person more so than my career as a broadcaster, you need good people to run businesses. So you need to be able to lure executives that are at the top of their game to come and run companies in our country, right? Like there's
Mhm.
that, but there's also, do they all need to fly around on a private jet?
Well, I mean, I think, yes, you're right. Let's use a positive example where Check TV, where you work, you have a show, it's an independent, very unusual independent TV station. And well, we don't see the bottom line. I mean, I guess the people who are shareholders do, but
The
it's not a
employees are
pub.
shareholders. The
Yeah, but it's
employees
not a
own the
public company.
station.
It's not a public company, so we don't get access to it.
Right.
But
But let
just
me
like
just
Black Press
interject
was.
there because I do
Yeah.
know this one thing, because I'm so glad you brought up Check. Check is North America's only employee owned media outlet. And I'm very proud to be a part of it. I, along with Linda Steele, lease our show to Check. So
Mhm.
we aren't employees. We don't have a stake. We don't have an ownership piece. We are contractors with Check. But I have, friends like Don Taylor. Donnie Taylor, when I first started, he is an employee of Check, so he's a part owner. And when it announced that we were going to do this show a couple of years ago, Donnie immediately phoned me. We go way back, and he's like, "You're going to love this. Like, it's
Mhm.
special. It's special because when you make money, everybody makes money. But for the first, I think it was 7 years, the people that ran that place didn't take a paycheck. Like, it was crazy commitment. And I think there
Yeah.
should be an opportunity for that to be in Trail and in Castlegar and in, these places in between times, because they need these local radio stations. So I hope somebody gives those licenses to, I don't know, the city or the
Mm.
the the forestry and highways and police, and you put young broadcasters in there and they're fed the information so that it is there for people that need it. I think it's a public service that needs to be not funded with a massive bankroll, but it should be, um, you know, like we take care of parks, like we take care of all of the things that are important to community, right? Do we need to talk about park board here?
Well, no, I mean, just to finish my thoughts on this issue, because obviously I have, I've been working with the newspaper industry for a long time. Wrote a
Yeah.
history book on newspapers. I've seen that industry evolve. You and I work in media. We probably have there is a station in Vancouver, a major station, and I get to see ratings because I do media buying. That has a zero share. To those who don't understand how media works, is means nobody's watching this newscast. I won't say which one it is, but it means basically it has zero. There's no value to be putting an ad on this entire TV station, but their newscast literally has a zero, and that's not good. Um, but you're right. I think there's this opportunity locally to create these media outlets, whether it be radio, TV, or print, or digital. Obviously, print being more digital, all of them moving towards digital. Our show probably gets more viewers and listeners than that newscast that I'm referring to. And so this is the way things are evolving. But what's interesting, when I worked at CBC, and I worked up in Prince Rupert and Prince George, and the share, when I talk about zero at a certain station in Vancouver, in Prince George, the CBC radio station had a 22% share. That means 22% of everybody listening to radio was listening to CBC in Prince George. Very important part of what they do. There has been, over the years, this movement by CBC, as an example, and the federal government, where they're funding newspapers through this fund that has been created via Google's money, that is propping up journalism, which is great. And I know there's a lot of people who hate this, but I don't understand whether the solution we have, if we can't take money from a giant American conglomerate to underwrite Canadian journalism, that's literally tied. The money has to go to the journalist. It literally has to go. You get $55,000. The journalist gets the $5,000, not the media outlet. So it's very closely tied, connected to that. So it's creating journalism, but also the question of CBC and its future. We underwrite CBC over, is it $1 billion a year, billion three, as taxpayers? What is its mandate anymore? Why is it not picking up slack? When you say, we need to have community journalism or this needs to keep going. Well, I don't, I'm not a big fan of socialization, but the initial mandate of CBC.
I didn't suggest
No,
socialization,
no, no,
just to be
but
clear.
that's what
Just to be
people will
clear.
say.
No,
No,
but
no,
I'm
people will
listening
s
to you. But
yeah,
to be
no, no, yeah.
clear, I was not suggesting socialized radio. I was
No,
suggesting
no,
that
but
radio
it's
is important. And the people that say you can get that on a smartphone, I will argue that there are people who don't have smartphones
yes,
and don't have cell service and don't have access to Wi-Fi and don't.
that's right.
So it's the equipment and the technology. You and I have both gone to a lake just outside of downtown Kamloops, no cell service. And it's like right there. And there's no, I'm not even
Yeah,
talking way out in the boonies, but way out in the boonies deserves access to. And you can turn on a radio with a battery and nothing else. No subscription, no nothing. You turn on a radio and you can
right,
find out what's going on in the world if there is someone on the other end of that microphone. And for people who are shut in
right.
and perhaps have a disability that puts them in a position where they can't read a newspaper, they can't, whatever. Radio can be a lifeline. And just because you and I don't need it the way some people do, I want to advocate on behalf of those, because the people who have gotten in touch with me and told me that my voice through their radio has changed their lives.
Yeah, and let me just finish my point because I think that there is a place though for uh, our government, because the initial mandate of CBC was in these remote areas where there is no business case for this and there's no journalism happening. This is a dangerous situation
Right.
for democracy and for how we have an informed public to be able to do their work. So when the private sector is bailing, which is what's happening, and
Yeah.
small scale stuff just can't happen, then we have to ask ourselves as Canadians, what do we want? We actually have to go back 100 years to ask ourselves, to look at the past, to see how media was created and how journalism was created. Newspapers and traditional journalism as
Yeah.
a
You love newspapers.
broke
I love
as a
radio.
no, no,
Let's
no,
move
it's
on.
not.
We're
No,
getting
it's
inside baseball here. You
journalism
keep
though.
coming
But
back to
just let me finish.
newspapers.
Let me finish. Let me
Oh,
finish. It's not newspapers. It's journalism.
you keep
Balanced
saying
journalism.
newspapers.
Balanced journalism has only been around for over 100 years. Pro con, radio, TV, print, doesn't matter. We're losing it. We're losing it, and it's dangerous. And we need to make sure that we, as citizens of our country, ensure there's a way for balanced journalism to continue, whatever that model looks like in whatever medium it is. And that's what I'm worried about.
Okay, so today's news is that radio stations are being shuttered. So that's why I'm talking about the need to help these radio stations keep their licenses in these places, keep the call letters, keep it in a place where people can hear what's happening in their community, period.
Mhm.
Because people are going to get pissed off when it's like, and the CBC, and the CBC, and because people are like, defund the CBC. It's like, that's what's getting us here, right?
I
That
don't, I
this,
don't understand what you're saying, but okay, let's move on. Let's move on.
you don't understand.
I think we're saying the same thing, but
Well,
I think
yeah.
so.
You,
Okay.
yeah.
Anyways,
I
park
was
board.
trying to make a point about today's news
Yeah.
about radio stations. That's what I was doing. What do you want to
Yeah.
talk about next?
Well, park board is and city council and
Start with
Vancouver.
the police
What
board.
is going
Can
on?
we talk with the police? We got a couple of
Oh,
boards to get to here.
I've never seen that happen before.
In-camera
The
meeting
police board
discussions put public?
from a very respected person. I just, what is going on? What is going on? We'll talk about the provincial stuff. There's something going on behind the scenes that we are not aware of, whether it's staff or the politicians. Who and what is going on here that this person has resigned from the Vancouver Police Board for feeling like they were being pressured, being told, to
Put in a
get
position of
online.
conflict of interest because
I
two
mean,
people who were elected to the board, or what do you call it? Not assigned, who were brought on board,
mhm,
um, who both had significant ties to city funding. Like, how do
yeah,
you join a board that's chaired by the mayor? How do you disagree with that person on what they're putting forward or what's on the table if your business is beholden to city funds? Like, that's the
yeah,
gist of the story. But the in-camera meeting, because over the course of this podcast, as much as we love to fight and disagree, you teach me a lot, and you've taught me about in camera, and it's
mhm,
such a weird term Because you
Yeah.
think in camera
It's
means
the
you got a
opposite.
camera on
Yeah,
you, but
exactly.
in camera means you're not allowed to talk
No
about
camera.
this, right?
Yeah.
And what happens if you do? Because we are seeing a little bit more often where in camera doesn't really mean what it used to mean.
Well, it is an interesting, the ironic name of it. But I remember, for me, I got in a lot of trouble because I would come out and I would say, this didn't pass, or there was a decision, because it's not surprising if something didn't happen in camera. You're not allowed to say what happened exactly, but you certainly. Why can't I say what I did? I'm gonna bullshit. I'm gonna say what I did, and I
Yeah.
did, and I got in trouble. But I said, you find the law that says I can't say what I did in a
Yeah.
meeting. I'm not saying anything about anybody else, but if I'm willing, unless it has some other legal ramifications, like it meant like it was real estate deal where there's financial stuff.
Right.
But a lot of the stuff
Insider
went out,
baseball.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so
No,
much
you wouldn't
government
do
is
that.
going in camera now. It's ridiculous. And that's kind of what was my point with it. This kind of stuff should not be in camera. This should be debated in public. And that's why I'm bring on the legal battle. I'll take it. And they never did. They never did, because I was
And
right.
what was the thing that you can you say? What was the thing that
There
you
were
said you
several
said?
occasions.
What was the one that got you in shit?
God,
Do you remember?
I no, there was a couple that were related to one. I think it was some of a Broad Street Bridge, and I forget the other one. There was a few that I came out and I said,
Not earth shattering, perhaps not
they
necessarily
shouldn't have been in
in
camera.
camera.
It shouldn't have been. So those kinds of
Okay.
things are frustrating. And the Metro Vancouver, 90% of it's in camera. Like, it's ridiculous.
I do think that's ridiculous, right? Like, why can't we know what our elected officials are discussing? If, if not, well, obviously, I was listening in today on the Supreme Court of the United States. I was a fly on the wall for
Right?
2 hours listening to that.
Yeah.
And I thought it was fascinating. It was
Good time.
interesting because if
Oh my
you
God, yeah.
can't back up what your opinion is, if you can't back up, because when we got to Kavanaugh and Coney Barrett, it's like pretty clear whose team they're on, right? But that's fine. It's not,
Mm-hmm.
I don't agree with them, but that's what the conversations are about. They weren't disrespectful in it, but it's like, okay, I would love to know around the Metro board who's saying what. I'd love to know around the
Mm-hmm.
Surrey Police Board who's saying what
Right.
or not.
Right.
I'd love to know why there are
Why
mayors.
can't you attend? Why can't you attend?
Why can't you attend? But one more than that, why are the mayors the chair here? Why
Yeah.
are the mayors chairing police boards anywhere? Because I talked to Linda about this. Obviously, she has
Mm-hmm.
her husband is chief of police in Surrey, so I get that her frustration around who's the chair in Surrey. But she talks a lot about being from Alberta and being from Edmonton, and that's not on in Edmonton. That's not how it's set up there. We're
Not really.
unique in a lot of ways out in these parts, and it's like, huh, why?
Sounds like the province might need to fix that. I
Yeah,
mean,
but will they? Let's talk about the province because
yeah.
did you see the
Mm.
ads? Speaking of the province and Surrey, the ads that Brenda Locke and her team behind the scenes put up
No.
attacking
Oh,
the provincial government, actually
uh, really
openly now showing that
spending
they're
money.
going after that government specifically. And then you find out who's behind the scenes. Did you hear that? You
No.
know who's behind the
I probably
scenes.
know them, but
Yeah.
go ahead.
So it's Mark Marison, it's
Oh,
Christy Clark, it's Peter German, it's I don't know
classics.
why I've tried everything to get rid of these emojis. If you're watching us on YouTube, I apologize for the
Good
thumbs
thing
up. I don't need
90% of
them.
us, 90% of our viewers are listeners.
Right. It still
So,
bugs me, still pisses me off. But no, but hearing why does this feel so politically charged? Because it is. It's politics. It's trying to do damage to the provincial government as they're heading toward, it's a long time before we get to an election, but headed that way. And,
oh, yes.
there are a lot of things in the air right now. The juggle is real
I think you nailed it
for,
there, though. You just
yeah.
nailed it. It's the fact that they're spending money and it's political. We're talking, what, 8 months till election? You're going to see so much stuff starting to pop up that is going to be both sides and all sides. There's 3 parties now, 4 parties provincially. So it's going to
Right.
get really ugly because it's, certainly on the center right, you have to, the competition is, even the Green Party attracts a lot of people on the right of the spectrum. Strangely, they
Really?
do. Yeah, I
Didn't
mean,
know
so you
that.
lose. I know my mom went from conservative to green. I'm like, what? And so
Does she
there's a
just
lot
love
of.
Sonia Firstino?
No, this was a long time ago, but it's quite common that a conservative, when they become older, they kind of decide, oh, maybe the Green Party. They don't look at their
Oh, sorry.
financial
First
skills.
to now. First to now. She wants first to now. She's no longer to
Oh, yes,
know.
that's right.
She's to now. Shoot.
But yeah, no, I
Okay.
think this is going to get really ugly. And I think that Surrey, with the fact that you're saying that Mark Marison and Christie and those kind of people are behind it, this is not about Surrey Police Board anymore. This is about the NDP. This is what this is all about. And there's going to be millions of dollars spent. And it's going to be interesting. Of course, you and I, we love watching this kind of stuff.
Drama.
And it's going to be interesting. But I think that is okay. So now we're in an election year. So now there's a lot of other things at play here, and this is really about discrediting the premier, and which goes to the next issue, which of course, with the resignation of a senior cabinet minister with this week, like what's
Yeah,
that all about?
this is a red hot subject because 1 week ago while we were chatting, I was doing this podcast before going and taping Steele and Vance, where MLA Selena Robinson joined us as the post-secondary education and future skills minister talking about international students. We had booked her,
Yeah,
a week in advance, whatever. Didn't realize the storm that was brewing around
I
her.
thought it was actually on your show. I was like, what? Did this happen? Because I thought, oh my god, what did she say on Jody's show?
No, it didn't it and you know what? The mob came after Linda and I until Linda was like, "Guys, calm down. We were busy. Jesus, we're not living our lives on Twitter." Because that's largely where the
There's
pushback.
production involved with your show.
There's production involved. We actually have to juggle things, and there was only 4 of us doing it. So there's that when you wanna
It's
talk about
amazing.
how shrinking media. Anyway, um, but watching how that all unfolded and then seeing, I guess it
Hmm.
was Friday, it was Thursday or Friday. I think it was Friday because Thursday was our show. On Friday, the premier stepped up and said, listen, obviously that's an embarrassing mistake and the ministers apologized and, you know, we'll take,
Hmm.
I paraphrasing, but basically the legal ease of, you know, she'll reflect on this and move on, whatever. And then over the weekend, a couple of really, I don't even know what the term is. Outspoken is an understatement. Um,
Yeah.
People
These are tricky
online.
waters. This is tricky
Well,
waters that
but
you're
it's
in
a
here.
well, but we're
Because
watching it
you,
happen. I mean,
I know.
having been
And
the
then,
target of harassment for 7 years, I don't want to watch anybody be targeted in the way that people are targeting one another. And I'm not even going to pick a side and say which side
I
is
know.
targeting which
Because
other side. I'm just saying that it's all really, really over the top, high vibrations of negativity in ways that are astonishing. And then to see the premier, I guess Monday first thing was
Mhm.
like, yeah, the MLA Robinson has resigned. And then, the speculation starts to roll out like, did she though?
Which leads to our thing that we talk a lot about, which is how parties destroy themselves. And this is a crack in the caucus. There's something going on, just like we were saying, what's going on at the police board. What's going on here, really, behind the scenes with the NDP? Obviously, the premier got pressured, whether it was external pressure or internal pressure, but certainly the NDP are very torn on this issue of the Palestine and Israel. They're the left wing side is very, very confused by this because they don't, we know they're very conflicted. And so I imagine that conflict is happening within the NDP caucus. And this, of course, just like, how can, just, I can only imagine the heated conversations that happen behind the scenes, and now you have damage within the caucus. You can't. It's really hard to repair that damage once it starts. Once that wound, once that cut is there, it just starts to fester. And if the BC United and the Conservatives and the Green Party are politically motivated and smart, they're
Yeah,
gonna pick at this. They're gonna
they're going to
take this
target it.
and
Yeah,
they're gonna just where okay, what happened? Now how do we who was on that side? Who was on this side? Who was pressuring the premier to make the flip-flop on this? Now how do we target those people? How do we make this worse? How do we make the premier look weak? We got 8 months to an election. Our number one goal is to make this guy look unworthy to be the premier. They don't have time to switch. So now their number one goal of all 3 political parties going after this guy, all now going, okay, we got something going on here. And then you've got the whole Surrey police thing happening as well simultaneously. These are things that destroy political parties and help the opposition, whoever that might be, win.
yeah.
It's interesting.
It's It's interesting also, unrelated to the subject matter of what is broken in this situation,
Yeah.
but just in general, as a leader, to come out and say,
Mhm.
acknowledged, apologized, support,
Mm.
and then days
Not
later
cool.
be like,
Flip.
we're done here. How does everybody else feel? Because everybody's going to step in
Of
it at
course.
some point, George.
Of course.
Everybody is going
Of
to. It's like
course.
saying you're going to get
Who's
along all the
Yeah.
time. You and
Am
I
I
just had
next?
a
Who's
fight
next?
off the top of our freaking
Yeah.
podcast, and I love you. You know what I mean? Like everybody's going to have their day. So
But you
do
in
you
a
have each other?
party,
But do you
this
have
is
each other? Oh, and you're
right?
allowed to make a mistake and apologize. And I'm again not talking about this particular subject.
No,
I'm talking about
subject
in
aside,
general, right?
100%. This is a real problem because, of course, yeah, the next issue that comes along, whatever it might be, if you're the person who's being pressured for whatever, when you stupid thing, when politicians say stupid things all the
All
time,
the time.
am
So
I
do media
next? Am I?
people.
Am I? Yeah, exactly. Am I next? Am I next? Can I? Does the premier have
Right.
my back? Does the
That's
NDP
it.
have my back? Like, I want to be able to be honest, and I want to be able to say my opinions as a politician. But if I can't, how far does this go? How strict is and who's in charge?
Who
Who
how
pressure?
good is your
Who's really in
word?
charge here?
How good is your word? When
Eby
you
flip
say
flopped,
something,
so
do you
he's not
mean
in
it?
charge. He's
Right?
not in charge. Clearly,
No.
somebody pressured him. He flip flopped. That shows to me that
Who?
somebody else is pulling the strings behind the scene. Who is it? Why is that? This
Mm.
weakens him. It's bad for him. It's bad for the party. It's great for everybody else, and it's going to
Looked like
be
spin. It really did look like spin, didn't it?
it's been
This
like
is
woo
Unspun
woo
Podcast,
woo.
by the way. Unspunpodcast.com is where you find out more about us. Um, what are some of the other things we wanted to talk about? Specific
Well,
to the
Trump. We did
well,
talk. You touched on that, I think, a little bit,
can
but
we
yeah.
just quickly hit the park board because there's a lawsuit now?
Oh
That's
yes,
what we're doing. We're going to do that. Who's paying for that?
didn't I predict that? I believe I
You did.
predicted that. I did
You
predict that.
did.
Yeah, it's
Very smart, George.
and we'll see if it's effective. I think what was I was thinking about this the park board, and actually I was talking to somebody from the suburbs yesterday. I was out in White Rock for a meeting, and I was talking to this old friend of mine who lives out there. Has lived out there forever, very suburban. She's a mom. She lives, she works in comms, but she was saying, and there's actually two people I talked to, and they both said the same thing. They said, "Well, what is the deal? This park board? It seems kind of elitist." Exactly that, and I think I brought this up before. This is what the premier will say. Well, I'm going to support the dismantling of the park board because it seems kind of elitist. Why does Vancouver have a special park board? Why no other city across the region, which is where he needs to win,
Yeah.
doesn't have a park board? So I'm for the people. The other thing he will bring up is the fact that why does the Vancouver, and this is bad news for this is where that our mayor might be going, oh crap. He might go, by the way, why does Vancouver have its own charter? Why is it not part of the municipal charter? Maybe we should look at that while we're at it. I'm going to actually perhaps dismantle the Vancouver charter, because why is Vancouver, where they only have a
Special.
few, why is it so special? I
Yeah.
support all of British Columbia. That's the message. I think if he goes for the dismantling the park board, that's the message. Those are the things he's going to say.
Fascinating. Because when I'm looking at, and I will say we got a little bit of reaction last week after saying that the response from the pro park board alliance, allegiant, whatever you want to call the group that are,
Yeah.
when we were saying it's become a little shrill, like it's become a little, what's the right, like over the top, a little yelly. And if you got to yell, maybe you don't have much of a leg to stand on. You should probably talk about why it's important and historically what has worked, while also acknowledging where the shortcomings have been. Because that's what's been missing here. And it feels like this legal move more so leans into just the nuts and bolts of it for me. The problem from in my mind
Mm.
is we already pay enough for stuff that isn't working. So this kind of looks like the park board once again not staying in their lane and just taking care of mowing the lawn and making sure the trees are healthy.
Exactly.
Right? Like
You said earlier inside
everything.
baseball. I think
Yeah,
that's kind of this as well, right? This is like, what is
exactly.
happening? What is this
Yeah.
thing about most people in Vancouver going, sorry, oh yeah, the park board. Oh yeah, that's yeah. Oh, I hate it. Our parks are a mess. What is this thing that's going on? Oh, that sounds dumb. I mean,
I've given up on Kids Pool, and after my entire life of swimming there, literally my entire life of swimming there, I the fight in me is gone. I've started Pilates. I can't.
out of water. Out
Well,
of
I just
water.
can't out of the water swimming is what I'm doing now, and yay for me that I can afford that because it's expensive as
It
hell
does look like
versus the
that
few
Pilates.
dollars.
It
What's
does
that?
look like out of water swimming. It
It
does.
does.
It is
Well,
weird.
it's been 4 years now that I have only been able to go swimming 3 times, and I used to swim from the day it opened to the day it closed every year my entire life. Like, it's just
I will
remarkably
point.
bad management. What?
John Cooper made sure I'll mention this, that if that's not park board, it's city is supposed to oversee blah blah. It's like, okay, the line between city and park board. To me, the
The
argument
park
about
board the
they
park
see
board
community center,
put
all
the
that stuff.
COVID restrictions on that
I
pool, not
know
the city.
this is the problem. This is why maybe amalgamating
Let's go
park
just
board
to the
within the
city,
city.
and I'll go stand in city council and I'll say, open up my goddamn pool. Open up the pool so that other children like mine get to do what mine did when he was a little toddler and walk around in that little shallow end and feel like he's looking around at the beautiful mountains and oceans and all the things that we have here. I will go and stand in council. I can't get into a park board meeting because there's too many mad people there. I won't do it. But speaking of mad people, let's hit on Trump just in this last 2 minutes that we've got here. What do you think's going to
Mad.
happen?
My God, I don't know. This is really interesting. I mean, these decisions being made, and I'm reading those tweets. I'm going, holy crow! I assumed that there would be an easy process, that the any kind of decision by their courts would be like for
Binding?
Trump in the end. But it's looking like maybe not on this issue of him having his name on the ballot specifically. It's so crazy, interesting. I mean, it's hard not to be a bit obsessed with the madness that's going on down there.
It
It's
is
if you're into politics.
the slow molasses up the hill justice, like the debate in front of the Supreme Court justices today, where the Trump attorney seems that Trump has a really smart attorney because this guy was on it. What I was listening to anyway, which is surprising
Hmm.
to me because it seems all of his other ones are like, "Eh."
He's had a lot of them.
He has. But there was this, wanting to call the insurrection that was just a riot, and having, one
Hmm.
of the justices be like, seriously? Um, but then having the more conservative justices almost like lob up opportunities and subject matter for Trump's lawyers to be like, right, exactly. Like, it was
Hmm.
interesting, the parlay at play, right?
Yeah,
It's like a dance. Yeah.
in the words, euphemism. That's where we're seeing when you talk about spin. My God, the
Hmm.
different terminology. It wasn't it was a riot. It was a riot. It's okay, yeah, it was a riot, but they also breached the doors of a sacred
People
building.
died.
Is meant to be,
Yeah.
a sanctuary of stability for democracy. You don't do that. That's not how it works. And
Hang
remember I talked
Mike
about it. I brought
Pence.
this up at City Hall, and that happened, and then I got so much hate.
Yeah.
But how dare I compare what happened at City Hall in Vancouver to what happened in Washington? Well, you breach in a riot situation the internal workings of a democratic institution. It's no longer a riot.
No.
It's a revolution, and that's I don't care what level of government. You might say I'm overrated, but it doesn't matter. This is not how democracies work.
No.
You vote them out. You vote the bums out. That's how democracy works.
And you need the media to hold the feet to the fire of those who would wish to spin you. And it's on all of us to stay informed. And today, back to what we were talking about off the hop, is it's a dark day for journalism and people who are screaming at the top of their lungs that mainstream media is garbage. Check yourselves, because mainstream media in Canada has many checks and balances and is really important, in making sure that those who would abuse power are held to account. Period.
Mm-hmm.
Without
And
that,
absolutely.
there are a
And by
lot
the
of people
way,
making a lot of money off our backs.
yes. And to note, Jody and I will not be broadcasting from the Soviet Union or Russia or whatever we call it now. I won't get you
Oh,
started on that one. I won't get
Jesus.
you on Tucker. I won't get you
Say
started on
goodnight,
Tucker.
Georgie.
George_Affleck.
That's right. At George
_
Affleck on Twitter. A fun Twitter follow for sure. At Jody Vance. Unspunpodcast.com. Share it with your friends. We're here every Thursday, and it's always a good time. Right, Georgie?
Something. It's
Something.
it can be tough, but it's fun. It's always fun.
Okay. See you
See
later.
you next week. Bye.
Bye.